If you're thinking about breaking up or getting divorced, you are stuck in what's called the relationship loop of doom, which over 95% of relationships fail during this stage, only to repeat it again with another partner. Now, this is gonna hit hard, so keep watching. This is the relationship loop of doom. It doesn't matter who starts it, it only matters that you understand the cycle that happens. At some point in the relationship, you will deal with conflict and stressors, either inside the relationship or outside the relationship. Let's say that the stress happens with the husband, and he is overworked and he's stressed. Things are not going to plan, and these are going to trigger his wounds. He's not going to feel enough. He's going to feel unsafe and stressed. He might even feel guilt and shame that he's failing as a husband. Regardless of which, these wounds do not feel good. And what he will do with these wounds is do a coping mechanism to deal with the pain. And so that coping mechanism is going to look like shutting down, stonewalling. It's going to look like distracting himself with work, more work, video games, entertainment, porn, a million ways to distract that we all do in society. It can also look like avoiding his partner and isolating himself, right? Keep in mind, he is not doing any of these things to hurt anyone. He is just trying to soothe the pain that's happening right here. However, what is that actually going to do instead? That's right. It is going to trigger his partner, triggering his partner's deepest wounds, feeling alone, feeling unseen, feeling unheard. These are just examples. So when his partner feels these core emotional wounds, guess what she's going to do as well? She's also going to do a coping mechanism. She's also going to do a coping mechanism that she also learned to deal with that pain, right? So that coping behavior is going to look like criticizing, getting emotional and intense, perhaps getting controlling and manipulative, right? Once again, she's not trying to hurt anyone with these behaviors. She is just trying to soothe these pains inside her. By now, you should already get the idea that that's going to do the opposite and instead going to trigger him even more. So her coping mechanism is going to trigger him and is going to touch these emotional wounds even more, which will make him do more of the coping. And then the cycle continues, and it will not stop if they keep on coping. It will be this infinite loop of doom. How familiar does all of this look already? Relationships can be in this infinite loop of doom for several years, 10 years, 20 years, until it fails. If they do not do anything about these core emotional wounds, they will continue to cope with them, which triggers the other person's wounds, and it keeps going around in circles. So a good question to ask yourself now is, why these emotional wounds? Why these coping behaviors? Why are they attracted to each other? Because it seems like a very bad couple. It's actually quite the perfect match, because if we come down here, you will see that they remind each other of their childhood upbringing. And so their wounds complement each other. Where do the wounds come from? They come from their parents. Maybe this guy had a very critical, emotional, intense, controlling mother, and a father who was very absent and not around and failed to be a father figure to him. Maybe her father was absent and avoidant, and it left these deep wounds of feeling alone and abandoned growing up. And so his mother wounds complement her father wounds. His father wounds complement her mother wounds. It is literally the perfect energetic polarity manifesting together. So what you have to understand is that this attraction is based off of familiarity, complementary polar energies, and trauma bonding. And these are all basically different ways of describing the same thing, is that these two are perfectly matched together based off of a similar family background. It's just that he learned to be more like his father, becoming more avoidant to cope with the pain of being controlled, criticized, shamed, all these different emotional wounds. And she probably learned how to become, and she likely learned to become her mother to cope with her pain with her father, her absent father, who is avoidant, unavailable, feeling alone and abandoned in the process. And so he reminds her of her father, and she reminds him of his mother. Not always like this. Sometimes it's not gender specific. Sometimes you may find yourself partnering or being attracted to someone that reminds you of your father. Someone else reminds you of your mother. You might alternate between the two. Or your partner might have qualities and traits from both of your parents. Now, the problem here is that what most people will do to try to solve this issue right here is that they will try some basic things like couples therapy. They'll try to learn the love languages. They'll even try individual talk therapy. All of this is intellectual, right? Well, there's a problem with that, because what happens when you get triggered and you have your deepest core emotional wounds being triggered to the surface? Well, what happens is that you go into a state of fight or flight. And so that means when you go into a state of fight or flight, that your rational reasoning part of your brain shuts down. And what takes over instead is the amygdala, hijacking the entire process. And then you find yourself overpowered by these coping mechanisms, right? One partner doing the shutdown, the stonewalling, being distant, avoidant, isolating. The other person getting critical, getting emotional, controlling, manipulative, getting clingy, right? These are the actions of someone that's in the fight or flight emotional state. And all this stuff goes out the window when they're in that state. And if you're watching this, you've likely experienced this already happening. You know better, but you don't do better when you get triggered in just the right way or triggered enough times. All of this gets hijacked. So in order to resolve all of this, we have to connect to these core emotional wounds as they are felt in the body, through the nervous system, as they are remembered through the little boy or the little girl that's still inside you. So what's that going to look like? So if the amygdala hijacks the brain and the rational part of our brain shuts down, right, meaning that all this stuff goes out the window, then how do we actually resolve and heal and change things, right? How do we make the relationship better? How do we make ourselves better? So this is what we do to get to the root of the issues. This is going to save you decades of therapy right here. Number one, you got to connect directly to the core wounds through the body, not just the mind. Remember, the mind shuts down, so we have to connect through the body. We have to retrain the fight or flight response. That means we have to engage with it directly, which is uncomfortable. That means all those core wounds are feeling abandoned, alone, not good enough. All those hurt feelings that come up in relationships, we have to engage with it directly and begin a retraining process of the nervous system. This also looks like reparenting the inner child and subconscious. There has to be a reparenting happening because how you are from childhood right here is heavily conditioned. Lifetime of you being conditioned by your parents. Generational trauma that has to be reparented and retrained as well. And a big one too is really you gotta get coached. You have to get coached practicing going against your fear response. Your mind will hijack this healing process. It will convince you, like all hell, that your partner is the enemy, that you have to cope here and protect yourself. And all it's going to do is keep you feeling your wounds and being stuck in this vicious cycle. The mind will keep you locked into this cycle. And so having support and guidance to hold your hand to keep going against your fear response, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response here, right? This is a nervous system hijacking thing that's happening. You gotta go against it, right? And you have to practice going against it, right? Doing the opposite of what your fear wants you to do. And then, right, which is a combination of the body, nervous system, and inner child reparenting, retraining, reworking. All of this is a fundamental paradigm shift from conventional therapy and conventional forms of healing, quote unquote. It is body focused. It is a bottom up approach, not a top down. Remember, the top being the mind, the brain, it shuts down when we're triggered. That's why we have to start bottom up in the body, in the nervous systems, through how the emotion and pain is felt in the body. Bottom up. It is also what I would consider an inside out approach, not an outside in approach. Let me tell you the difference. Inside out approach means that as you change inside by doing all this work, all this is internal work within yourself, then your outside changes, your relationship changes, your marriage changes, your work relationships, family relationships. All of it's a reflection of your inside environment. Your relationship, again, your relationship with yourself. That includes all of these very uncomfortable, painful core wounds for either one of you. Your relationship with those things dictate your outside environment, dictate your current and future relationships. And so that's the paradigm shift that we have to make. Most of Western psychology mentality is outside in. If I just communicate better with my partner and get them to give me my needs, I'll feel better inside. If I just make the money, I'll feel better inside. If I just get the validation outside of me, I'll feel better inside. Fill in the blank. If I just get the fill in the blank from outside myself, I will feel better inside. I can guarantee you that you've been trying to do that already for a long time. It's not working. Failing miserably. This Here, we gotta cross that paradigm out and shift into an inside-out approach. As you change inside, your outside circumstances will then match that and reflect what is shifting inside you. That is real healing, that's true healing. That's how you're gonna change your life and your relationships. And that is exactly the journey that I guide clients through, both individually or couples. If you're interested, follow my profile for more details, and I'll see you on the other side.